What's up, Net Soldiers? I'm the Alliance. Welcome back to another video. Today we have another unpopular opinion, and this one comes from Frank Thomas III, and he says, I like Spider-Man 3. Now, because of this, I wanted to do a video on Spider-Man for a while, and because of him bringing up this topic, I thought to myself, you know what I'll do? I will actually go back, I will watch the film, and I'm gonna see how much better it is or how much worse it is since I was a kid. So I'll give you a little bit of backstory before I go too deep into this. I used to love the Spider-Man movies. Spider-Man was like my favorite superhero ever up until the time that Captain America came on the scene. So Spider-Man was the best. Spider-Man 1 and 2, those were my favorite movies as a kid. Besides, Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, they were up there though for sure. When it came to superhero movies, I honestly thought that the Spider-Man movies completely wiped the floor with the X-Men movies at the time. But although I wasn't a massive fan of the X-Men because it was very complicated compared to Spider-Man, I would say Spider-Man movies were more, kid-friendly, and their stories for the X-Men were a little bit more complicated for a kid. But both still good franchises. But when it came down to it, Spider-Man was definitely my preferred Marvel franchise out of the two of them. So I remember going to see Spider-Man 1 in theaters, and that was an awesome movie. Spider-Man 2 came out, and it was an even better movie. And then I remember one time, I think I was actually in Florida at the time. I think I was on vacation or whatever, and it was my birthday. And my mom and dad were like, hey, what do you want to do for your birthday? And I was like, I want to go see a movie. And it was raining that day or something like that. So we want to go see Spider-Man 3. And I remember leaving the theater and thinking, oh, that was a fun movie. But it's not as good as the last one. And then, of course, as time has gone on, I have learned that, yes, that is in fact the truth, is that Spider-Man 3 gets a lot of hate, and there's definitely a lot of problems with that movie compared to the first and second film. I think it's because of the fact that at the time, I just thought, I think that there might have been too many villains when I was a kid, and which that is the case in my opinion now as well. But there's a lot of background stuff you don't really think about as a kid. You think oh, there's too many villains, and that's just because the movie was made that way. But no, there was a lot of we've learned from that time, from Sam Raimi himself, that there was a lot of studio interference. There's a lot of execs who don't really know a good story messing with the story to sell more toys and more merchandise, adding characters who weren't particularly supposed to be in the film in the first place to kind of be able to sell more merchandise. And unfortunately, in doing that, you end up kind of making your story not as good because you're just shoehorning characters in, aka Venom. So it wasn't meant to be that way, and unfortunately it became that way, and we never saw Spider-Man 4 because of it. And I heard Spider-Man 4 was going to be an interesting film. I actually heard that the Lizard might have showed up in Spider-Man 4, and even Carnage maybe would have even showed up in Spider-Man 4, so that would have been cool. Maybe they would have saved Carnage for Spider-Man 5. I honestly wish that we can go back and we could trade the Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2. Although I kind of like the Amazing Spider-Man 1. The second one was trash though, for sure. That's the worst Spider-Man movie that's ever existed. I wish I could trade those two films for Spider-Man 4 and 5 though. It would have been such a good saga to see. Instead of ending the third film on kind of a low note, which would be Spider-Man 3, it would have been cool to see Spider-Man 4 and 5 perhaps kind of raise the bar. By that point, Sony kind of learned by The Amazing Spider-Man, hey, throwing all these enemies and all these villains into this film isn't really making the film better. It's in fact just kind of making it worse, and people are noticing that. And unfortunately, while they learned that lesson in The Amazing Spider-Man 1, they instantly just completely forgot about it and did the exact same thing in Amazing Spider-Man 2. Do you know what I mean? So that was an awful decision, and they should have just made Spider-Man 4 and 5, regardless of how much I might like The Amazing Spider-Man 1, because that wasn't that awful film. But like I said, Amazing Spider-Man 2, garbage. So it would be nice to see 4 and 5 in my opinion. In fact, if they wanted to make 4 and 5 now, at least 4, I'd be okay with it. If they would bring Tobey Maguire back, 15 years later, an older Spider-Man, maybe he's got a kid by this point, maybe he's training the younger Spider-Man. If they wanted to do that, even with Tom Holland's, Tom Holland can stay in the MCU. If they want to do another, bring back Tobey Maguire, bring back the cast, and do a future. We're in the future now, and we see where Spider-Man is at and his kids. That would be awesome. I would love that, but we probably won't see that, I'm gonna guess. But maybe if Sony, they're doing their own universe, it seems like, with Venom, so why don't they just bring back Tobey? Now, with that little tangent out of the way, let me get back to the main topic. So, Spider-Man 3. I just recently watched it last night, and I have to say, it is a much better movie than it was. I remember really disliking this movie for the last 10 years, and it is actually a pretty fun movie. I think part of the reason why these Spider-Man movies are so good is because that they don't take themselves so seriously. They're quirky 2000s films, you know? They meet that era's time period and how things kind of work in the early 2000s movies. They meet that so well, and they do a good job of representing that time. And I think that these films are just great because of it. Of course, Spider-Man 1 and 2 are better, Spider-Man 2 being the best in my opinion, but I think it's interesting to hear that people still like Spider-Man 3, and in fact, looking back on it, I thought that it was still going to be bad. I go back now, and it's actually a much better film than it was in the past, which is weird. The last act gets a little choppy, but the rest of the film was actually pretty fun, and I had a good time watching it. Now we have Frank Thomas III's opinion on Spider-Man 3. We also have another opinion on Spider-Man 3 in here, and this one is the Hooded Maniac 360. He says, unpopular opinion, Spider-Man 3 is better than Spider-Man 2. Now, while I'll admit, Spider-Man 3 is much better film than it once was, in my opinion, and it has definitely gotten better with age, it is nowhere near Spider-Man 2. In my opinion, Spider-Man 2 is still one of the gold standards for making a superhero movie. Now, sure, we may have seen a couple other superhero movies kind of surpass Spider-Man 2. The best examples being The Winter Soldier and Avengers 1. Those films have definitely surpassed that movie, in my opinion. But it's still one of the best Marvel movies / superhero movies out there right now. And while I'll admit I am a little bit nostalgic for Spider-Man 2 in particular, because that's like the best superhero movie ever, and no one can say anything about it, you know, just so good. I have to disagree with you, Hooded Maniac, because you must be a maniac if you think Spider-Man 3 is better than Spider-Man 2. Now, of course, I'm just poking fun, I don't actually mean that, but you should get some help. No, but seriously, guys, Spider-Man 3, it's actually a much better film than it once was. If you haven't given it a chance in a while, I definitely recommend watching it. I think you'll have fun. I think in the past, it was seen as the downer in the trilogy. You know, Spider-Man 1 was good, Spider-Man 2 was great, and then Spider-Man 3 was the low point. I once used the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy as a comparison to the Godfather trilogy because the first two are great and the last one is awful. But I honestly don't think it works that way anymore. I mean, Spider-Man 3 still isn't up to par with the first two films, don't get me wrong. But now, going back and watching Spider-Man 3 again, I honestly can't say it's an awful film anymore. It's actually a pretty fun film. Like I said, it's not as good as Spider-Man 1 or 2, but it's still a pretty fun film, and I think that's what perfectly encapsulates this Spider-Man trilogy, is that it's a fun trilogy, you know? It doesn't take itself too serious, and I think it was a great time for superhero movies when you were Spider-Man, because it was so good. But, yeah. And while I'll admit Spider-Man Homecoming is a fun film too, there's something missing, in my opinion, and I'd like to see perhaps Tobey Maguire don his suit once again in the future, maybe with a kid or whatever. I don't know where they go with it. I think it would be cool though. Like I said, Sony could do it. You know, they still technically own the rights to Spider-Man. They just kind of license them out. So let's see what we can get. You know, I'd love to see it, even if it's like a small little thing. I think it'd be so cool to see. But that's it for this episode of Unpopular Opinion. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any of your own unpopular opinions you'd like to see me cover in a future video, make sure to leave those in the comments below. If I cover your topic, I will give you a shout out and everything will be cool. So, yeah. But please remember to like, subscribe, and turn notifications for more videos. And until next time, guys, I'll catch you later. Peace.